CCM is proud to be partnering with News Channel 8 for the final and only televised Connecticut gubernatorial debate in 2022. A crucial tenet of democracy, a debate is so much more than a question and answer session. It is the candidate's vision for our future. Rick Green, managing editor for News 8, joins the Municipal Voice this week to discuss the importance of this event and the state of news in 2022. We'd like to thank our sponsors at Gateway and Housatonic Community Colleges. The Municipal Voice is the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities podcast in collaboration with WTNH LP 103.5 FM. I'm your host, Matt Ford. As always, be sure to give us a like and let us know what you're thinking in the comments. CCM's Municipal Voice podcast continues to present a key forum on important state local issues. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the consensus views of CCM or member municipal leaders. Rick, thanks for joining us today.
Happy to be with you.
You used to work at the Hartford Courant, and today you work at News Channel 8.
That's correct.
Which are two pillars of Connecticut media, long running. How did you end up in journalism, and what drew you to it as a career?
I was always a newspaper guy, and what drew me to it was newspapers. So I worked in both Chicago and San Francisco before I came to Connecticut many years ago, and I hooked up with the Hartford Courant, which back in the 1990s, it was adding bureaus and reporters and covering the entire state. So it was an exciting place to be working in journalism.
The oldest continuously running newspaper in the country. That's right.
It still is. And I stayed for many years till this opportunity at News 8, WTNH came up, which was a chance to sort of bring my interest in Connecticut news to a different venue where they were looking for somebody with longtime experience working in Connecticut politics and just covering the state. So it's the same raw material here, but obviously TV news is different.
Yeah.
A minute and a half, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, not much time to tell your story. So you got to get to the point fast.
I know Marshall McLuhan always said the medium is the message. Does working at a newspaper or working on TV differ in the way you deliver the message? Are they doing kind of two different things, or is it versions of the same thing?
Absolutely. What you have here is, first of all, this comes at a time when everything's changing and how people gather their news. Everybody's using their cell phone now to access news, whether it's print or TV. But in TV, it's all visual. You have to have something people can see. It's got to be immediate. So there's a lot of newspaper stories that can kind of wander in a lot of different directions that don't work on TV. So obviously there's a focus on breaking news. We have a real interest at WTNH in trying to stake out the political government coverage ground. So we're putting a lot of resources, for example, into the election this fall. And trying to give people maybe more than you would get from your typical television station.
Yeah.
When it comes to covering campaigns.
And you bring up an interesting point. You mentioned, our phones and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
How does, TV, print, how do they compete in a modern world against online media?
Well, I mean, I would be someone who's sort of, I would say, an old print guy who got religion. So I'm big on digital. I think how you have to pay attention to how people are accessing their information now. Yeah. And it would be great if it was 1975 and we were reading our newspapers over coffee. I remember there was a statistic once that people spend an average of 17 minutes with their print newspaper back in the 1990s and 2000. Well, nobody spent that kind of time with a print newspaper anymore except grandma and granddad. And so you have to pay attention to shorter nuggets of news, how people are getting it. It's a 24-hour cycle. It's tracking every little development. It's the same product, but you just have to think about, look, if people are getting it off their phone, then you respect that and give it to them. And TV's going to have to reckon with that too. Let me tell you, here it's, people, a ton of people watch the 5 and 6 and 10 and 11 news, but that's going to go away as we continue to evolve towards everything being digital. And we've got to pay attention to that here at News 8 as much as anything. So we put a lot of resources into our digital product.
Yeah, I imagine that with any story, the first consideration is it going on the
Yeah.
TV show, but the second is how will it look or work online?
Yeah, and increasingly it's getting it up on digital before you ever worry about TV.
Yeah.
If the old routine was planning the day around the 5 and the 6 broadcast.
Hmm.
Well, okay, maybe you have a noon, but you gotta, if there's a verdict in the Alex Jones trial, you got to get
Yeah.
that up right now and not wait till, okay, we'll get it up at 5 o'clock,
You're
right?
not waiting 5 hours because everybody else
Yeah.
has already got it up on their website by
Yeah.
then. Yeah.
It's kind of like the old mentality with newspapers where it was like, well, we'll get it in by deadline tonight and it'll be in the print edition tomorrow. Well, that's gone. It's
Yeah.
a matter of getting it up accurately, clearly, and concisely, quickly online.
You mentioned that, your station in particular is
Yeah.
focusing on
Yeah.
local politics this year. And in a few short weeks, Connecticut residents are going to be headed to the polls to decide the future of Connecticut. How important is the 2022 election going to be, in your opinion, for Connecticut?
I think we're at a really interesting moment in Connecticut, and I'm biased. Okay, I'm a Connecticut native, spent most of my life here, but it seems like we're getting on track in certain
Hmm.
areas here in terms of making this let the world knowing that this is an attractive place to both live and do business in.
Hmm.
The signs that the state is getting its finances in better shape, what with
Yeah.
paying long-term debt. And so I think we've seen incredible growth in places like New Haven and Stamford, and a lot of optimism in Hartford and some of our other cities. So I think it's this moment where Connecticut can begin to emerge more. And so who's running the state is pretty important,
Yeah.
whether it's Bob Stefanowski, Rob Hodeling, or Ned Lamont.
Yeah. Speaking of running the state and the governor's race there, one of the reasons we're having you in particular on
Yeah.
this week is that WTNH and CCM are co-hosting the
Right.
final televised debate of the gubernatorial race,
Yeah.
which is a pretty big deal for us.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
that's going to be November 1st, 7 p.m. on TNH for everyone interested in watching. This is the second time that we've done this. We did it 4 years ago at our convention.
With
Why
the
is
Hartford
it
Courant at the time, I remember.
yeah, with the current involved as well, all three of us. Why is it important for organizations like ours to link up for this debate?
Well, I mean, is there a more important audience for these three candidates than the people that run every town and city in the state? I can't think of a more significant audience for them to be speaking to. I mean, yeah, I think parents and, taxpayers and everything, but the folks that run Connecticut's municipalities,
Yeah.
whatever policies Bob Stefanowski or Ned Lamont or Rob Hodeling come up with, these are the folks that are going to feel it right off.
Yeah.
If we're talking about tax cuts, or what do we do about the motor vehicle tax,
Yeah.
the property tax, or how are we spending all that COVID relief money? This is a pretty informed audience
Yeah.
that is going to be paying attention to everything these guys say. So I think it's a really cool setup, because you have people who are very aware and very informed, and these candidates can't BS this audience.
So if you don't mind, for our viewers at home, could you fill in a little bit about the debate, like what the format and how they can kind of expect it to run?
Yeah, so it's an hour-long debate. It'll be live on WTNH, so you could tune in at home if you want. Also streamed as well. There will be a moderator. Dennis House will be moderating this.
Okay.
We will have three panelists. Keith Kuntz, who's one of our morning anchors. Jody Latina, who is our chief political correspondent.
Yep.
And our third guest, I'm sure you would know, Joe DeLong, head of CCM.
Yep.
So it will be an opportunity. I think we're going to spend a lot of time trying to focus our questions so that they're precise, so that, politicians want to get their message out, and I respect that. But we want to hear some specifics.
Yeah.
So we're really going to be working on drilling down and getting them to answer questions where there's an answer that voters can use.
Yeah, really follow up to get the actual facts, not just sound bites.
And again, I'd come back to this audience. This is not an audience of typical political partisans here. These are folks who okay, Bob, okay, Ned, let's talk about how this is going to affect my school budget, or my roads budget, or my, how we're going to manage the next COVID flare up or something like that.
Yeah. We know the saying, all politics is local. And for News 8 and CCM, we're concentrating on local stories for
Yeah.
this. What kind of questions can we expect the candidates to be fielding at this debate?
Let's see. I think we want to ask, obviously we're going to be, taxes and the economy is going to be at front of mind. We've done 2 political surveys so far this year.
Mm-hmm.
The number one criteria that people are using for deciding who to vote for is the economy.
Mm-hmm.
And break that down to, inflation, taxes, cost of living kind of stuff. So, if we are moving into a recession, and we don't know that completely yet, there's some worrisome signs. What does this mean for Connecticut? Does this mean we're going to be seeing, we have Bob Stefanowski, who's arguing we should be using more of the state surplus and giving it back to people. You have Ned Lamont saying, well, you know what? I'm trying to be responsible here, because if there's a real economic downturn, we need to preserve the state's rainy day fund, the budget surplus. So I think there will be a lot of questions about how you're managing the state's budget and finances.
Yeah.
Beyond that, there's a lot of other questions that I think need to be answered about. So what are we going to see in terms of creating a better economic climate for companies in Connecticut? Are we, are we tackling some of these nuisance taxes that we hear about from the business side, and to make whether it's Hartford or New Haven more attractive? Some things are pretty obvious. We have pretty good schools here in Connecticut. How are we going to keep things at the level they are? Housing is a huge issue. I got to tell you, on all levels, from people who can't afford housing at all to young professionals who can't believe how much it costs to live, to rent an apartment in New Haven or Hartford. So there's some substance there, I think.
Yeah, I know we're putting out some issue bulletins right now from our advocacy department, and they're focused that housing is one of the big ones, the affordable housing issue. We did an entire bulletin kind of that and how it ties into economic development. So that'll be interesting.
I think you're right. People need to realize it's not like this sort of abstract thing. It's like from the equity side of it, huge. But there's also this notion of, you want to make Connecticut attractive to young families and keep them here. We got to figure out how to make it more affordable for them. I mean, it's like when you get to the level of moving to a town and buying a house, there's a great opportunity in Connecticut. But when you're deciding whether to start your career here, it can be an expensive place to live.
Yeah. If we want those young professionals coming in for these jobs, they got to have a place they can afford to live. They got to be able to come in. Yeah.
You are listening to the Municipal Voice on WTNH 103.5 FM.
We talked about how the audience in the actual crowd there is going to be local officials, mayors, first selectmen, all that kind of stuff. But obviously watching at home on TNH is going to be, all over Connecticut. What kind of questions do you think we can ask at the debate to help residents understand these candidates' visions for the future of our state?
Really good point. One of the criticisms I have is that I haven't heard enough from all the 2 primary candidates and the independent candidate. What would it mean to have you as governor? Like, Ned, okay, you've handled the pandemic quite well. The state's budget is in good shape. What's your vision for Connecticut in coming years? There's been so much talk about crime. Is crime really a problem in Connecticut? Certainly we're concerned about car thefts and things like that. But should we be directing more resources to the cities for crime fighting? As I said, if I want, for me personally, I want to hear about making the state more affordable, housing, what taxes. There's always just so much rhetoric about the property tax, whether it's for cars or whatever. Well, are there some concrete plans out there where they can actually do something? The affordability of Connecticut is a big deal, I think, for people.
So maybe just really drilling in and trying to get some actual plans and ideas rather than just platitudes about,
Exactly. Or just criticisms. But, under our previous governor, Malloy, we heard a lot about attracting big companies to Connecticut, giving them incentives. Lamont is focusing more on creating the environment to attract companies without having to pay them a lot of money. How's that going to pay off? There's some, places like Hartford, it's kind of, what are they going to do with all those big buildings in Hartford
Yeah.
that and nobody's working in anymore? Are they going to be able to make them into housing and, keep the capital city heading in the right direction? These are some difficult questions here.
Yeah, a lot of things to think about right now.
And another good one is transportation. Everybody talks so much about Metro North and how long it takes to get to New York, and making Connecticut more attractive by making the commute a little easier. So what are they going to do? Where are they going to find the money to do that kind of work?
Yeah, you just mentioned crime, and there's an interesting article recently that suggested a significant portion of Connecticut residents thought that crime was trending upwards.
Yes.
When the data actually suggests that it's lower than it's ever been.
Right.
What role do journalists and politicians have in promoting a well-informed public? And do those two positions ever diverge on how exactly they can and should disseminate that data?
So the whole issue of auto thefts here is a perfect example of that. Especially thefts of cars in the suburbs has gotten a lot of attention, and justifiably, if people are worried about safety and carjackings and thefts in the suburbs, the media should pay attention to it. The government, the police should pay attention to it. But I think the media has a responsibility for putting things in context here, and creating an hysteria around crime when the statistics show that long term crime is down in Connecticut. Homicides are up. Some other violent crimes are up. But the big picture, crime has been trending down. We better be keeping things in perspective when we're reporting this stuff.
Yeah, I think that's always important.
It's so easy to just focus on carjackings, catalytic converter thefts, be very afraid. I think we have to talk to people about what's happening in their neighborhood, but also presenting the big picture.
Yeah. Another big topic these days in the media is, fake news and all this kind of stuff. With so much misinformation floating around out there, particularly in social media and stuff, how hard is it to correct the record, as a traditional media outlet?
I come from a world where it never bothered me when people pushed back on journalists. That never was a thing that got to me. That being said, I was talking to a reporter the other day who was at the Alex Jones trial, and they were outside when there was a press conference. Alex Jones was having a press conference. There was a whole crowd yelling fake news to the TV reporters there. And I think you just have to strive to build trust with your readers or viewers and be transparent and clear, and acknowledge the fact that there's a ton of sources for news now. It's not just like the old days. People can choose their news. I mean, as I was holding up my phone earlier, they can go many different places for news. So you'd better double down on efforts to build that trust with the community and present the news as fairly as you can. Yeah.
The theme of our convention, where the debate is going to be this year, is getting back to the future of Connecticut.
Yeah, I love that.
On Back to the Future. But, after, several years of kind of pandemic times where it's like, next crisis, fix this, deal with this immediate thing.
Yeah.
We're, starting to talk about long-term plans, looking at the future and all this kind of stuff again. From your standpoint as a veteran journalist, how do you feel about the direction of our state? Are you optimistic? Does the infrastructure money coming in and the surpluses make you feel better about the future of Connecticut?
Maybe I'm getting older here, but I've been here living in Connecticut for 30 plus years. I'm feeling fairly optimistic about Connecticut, to be honest with you. I feel like there's more talk now about the good things in Connecticut and the positive direction that we see in a number of areas. I mean, my biggest criticism of Connecticut was always people complaining so much. And I feel like we need to focus on our attributes, Yeah, we're not New York, we're not Boston, but there's a lot of good things about this state. And I do feel like we're talking more about that. And, the pandemic has shown, hey, people are moving here.
Yeah.
And it's not so bad here because you can buy a nice house and send your kids to a good school district. And you can do that a whole lot cheaper than New York or Boston or Washington or Philadelphia. And I feel like we gotta sell ourselves more.
Definitely. Well, Rick, thanks so much for speaking with us today. It's been a real pleasure.
I just want to thank you all for hosting the debate early next month. It's going to be the last moment for people to see the candidates.
Yeah, it's the last debate before the election. It's the only televised one I think we're doing.
Yep, exactly. And as I said before, I think it's a perfect audience because this is a well-informed group. So we feel honored.
Mayors, first selectmen, the elected officials from all over Connecticut, big town, small town, will be there on hand.
So, well, wonderful. Well, thank you for including us, and thanks for the conversation.
Rick Green, thank you so much.
We'd like to thank our guest, Rick Green from WTNH. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Gateway Community College and Housatonic Community College. Learn more at gatewayct.edu and housatonic.edu. The Municipal Voice is a co-production by CCM at WNHH 103.5 FM. Kevin Maloney is our executive producer, Christopher Gilson is our producer, Harry Draws is on the boards, and I'm Matt Ford, your host. Be sure to check out our Facebook page and give us a like, and watch out for our CCM chat series on our YouTube page. CCM's annual convention returns Tuesday, November 1st at the Mohegan Sun Convention Center. This year's convention will be capped off by Connecticut's final 2022 gubernatorial debate. Learn more at ccm-ct.org.